The stench hit first ozone crackling in the dry air, mixed with the copper tang of old blood and something oily that stuck to your throat when you breathed too deeply. Even from outside the gates of the Apex Trials, Droveth Prime's infamous death arena, the scent was unmistakable. Eric adjusted his grip on the worn, metal-handled crate tucked under his arm and stepped into the main corridor. Lights flickered in the cracked ceiling above, where ancient plasma conduits buzzed and sputtered, barely holding back the dark. Signs in half a dozen alien scripts blinked erratically, advertising side bets, last-minute enhancements, and the rules of combat, which mostly boiled down to, don't interfere, don't complain, and don't bleed on the staff unless you're paying extra. Behind him, two security guards made a wheezing attempt at laughter, their mouths lined with vestigial gills and sharp, uneven teeth. That a weapon, human? One snorted, eyeing the crate. Eric set it on the floor. It's my fighter, he said. They didn't even bother hiding the laughter this time. A third guard had to brace himself against the wall, hacking up a glob of fluorescent spit that sizzled as it hit the concrete. Eric knelt and opened the crate. The animal inside looked up at him with sleepy eyes, snorted, and waddled out, its rough fur bristling in patches. It sniffed once, yawned so wide it showed off a mouthful of yellowish teeth, then promptly flopped into the dirt floor of the corridor and began to dig. "What is that?" came a voice from the front of the betting booth queue, thick with contempt and barely restrained laughter. Eric didn't look over. A honey badger, Earth predator. The jeering hit like a wave. Some aliens doubled over, others wiped their eyes with the corners of their robes. The odds boards lit up instantly. Contestant number 16, Earthling's Rat, 9,999 to 1. No name, just the nickname it had been given on site. Even the display algorithm couldn't be bothered to ask what it was. The honey badger ignored the lights, the noise, the vibrations underfoot from the nearby pre-match brawls. It turned in a tight circle, flopped onto its side again, and licked at its own paw like it was waiting for a nap to finish downloading. Eric sighed, straightened up, and made his way to the registration kiosk. He offered up the datapad and got a brief retinal scan in return. "You sure this is your combatant?" the registrar asked, barely looking up from his console. "Final entries are binding. We charge a cleanup fee if it dies too fast." "I know. And if it doesn't qualify, then it dies." "I know." Behind him, an inebriated miner, pale, skinned, and glassy-eyed, was halfway through swiping his betting card when he misbalanced and face-planted into the terminal. It chirped cheerfully. "Bet confirmed. 500 credits. Earthling's Rat to win." The miner pushed himself upright, blinking at the screen. "Did I just bet on the dog?" Someone next to him howled. "You just gave your paycheck to the pit, friend." "I like his spirit," the miner said solemnly, then belched. Eric pressed his thumb to the fight schedule. He didn't expect much. The honey badger had been a shipping error, a misrouted specimen meant for an ecology class back at the Galactic University. The box had cost more to send back than to enter into the trials. He figured if it survived the first fight, maybe he could scavenge enough from its remains to get something back. As the announcement echoed across the arena, "First match, Earthling's Rat versus Vorax Serpent." He picked up the crate and walked toward the pit. The arena floor opened like the maw of a giant beast. Lights beamed down from broken pylons, illuminating a battlefield of dried mud and half-digested bones. The crowd above buzzed with anticipation, the scent of stimulants and overcooked meat wafting through the vents. The opposing gate clanked open. The Vorax Serpent slithered into view. 20 feet long, its body coiled with muscle as thick as hydraulic pipes, scales glinting in shifting shades of green and violet. Its eyes glowed red. Its fangs hissed, venom dripping in steady ropes from its lips. The honey badger waddled into the pit like it was hunting a shady patch to nap in. A gong sounded. The serpent struck instantly. A jet of toxin sprayed outward, catching the honey badger full in the face. It staggered. Eric's heart stopped. The badger sneezed, shook itself. Then it charged. The serpent reared back, fangs bared. The badger leapt not at the coiled body, not at the thick neck, but straight into the open mouth. Screams burst from the crowd. Bookies shouted in disbelief. The honey badger vanished into a whirlwind of scales and muscle, blood spraying. For a full 30 seconds, the serpent writhed, slammed its head into the ground, into walls, into its own tail, trying to dislodge whatever was inside. Then it began to slow. Then it collapsed. The honey badger crawled out of a shattered eye socket, panting, one ear torn, its nose crusted with drying venom and blood. It flopped onto the dirt beside the corpse and rolled. Silence fell. Then came a roar. The bookies scrambled to reset the odds screens. People aliens rushed the betting stations, screaming, demanding reevaluations. The miner, now being carried by 2 others, let out a wild whoop. Eric just stood at the edge of the pit, feeling the world shift under his feet. The medtechs came to verify the kill. 3 drones scanned the serpent's twitching corpse. Its brain had been shredded, its nervous system practically turned to jelly. "That's not a rat," the announcer muttered through the arena PA. That's something else." Eric looked down at the honey badger. It yawned again. No fear, no recognition, no celebration. It had simply won. The roar did not fade when the serpent stopped moving. It changed pitch, like a storm that realized the mountain would not fall and decided to hammer it harder. Security drones zipped to the carcass. A ref in a rust-colored vest blew a whistle that cut through the chaos. The honey badger rolled once more in the dirt and shook off a patter of red. Eric vaulted the waist-high rail into the service trench and jogged to the handler gate. A medtech in gray armor met him with a scanner wand the size of a baton. The wand hummed over the badger. Tiny glyphs scrolled down a slate. "Heart rate up, breathing steady, pupils reactive," the medtech said. He spoke as if baffled that these words belonged to the same sentence. "Venom contact on facial fur and whiskers. No airway compromise. You can flush and clean." Eric knelt. He kept his movements slow and predictable. The badger bared its teeth at the wand, then lost interest. He twisted the cap off a squeeze bottle and rinsed the face with saline. He wiped away slime with gauze, careful around the eyes. The badger tolerated it as if he were brushing dust from a stubborn machine. One ear was ragged, where a fang had glanced it. Eric dabbed it with antiseptic and pressed a bit of gauze until the bleeding eased. "Vorax venom is mostly hemotoxic," the medtech offered, glancing at the readout. "Swells tissue, breaks vessels, nasty. Your animal does not seem to care." "Thick skin," Eric said. "If it stops breathing or starts staggering, that means the venom got through. It has not." The medtech raised his brows. "You talk like this happens often on your world." "Not often. Often enough to have protocols." The announcer in the tower cleared his throat into the system. The speakers crackled. "Adjust your wagers. Adjust your expectations. Adjust your soul. Earthling's entry continues to surprise us all. Round 2 begins after a short reset." Eric carried the badger back toward the prep alcove, a damp room under the stands where steam piped along the ceiling and sandbags leaned like sleeping guards. He set down the crate and offered a dish of water with electrolyte tablets crushed in it. The badger lapped and sniffed his hand, then curled on the mat with a grunt. Its chest rose and fell in short, efficient breaths. From the walkway above, voices cascaded down. "That was a trick," an armored trader barked. "Let me see that thing's teeth." "Regulations forbid inspections," the registrar replied without looking up. "Owners submit profiles. We hazard recertifications if someone lies. It costs a lot." "It is cheating," the trader insisted, jabbing a finger toward Eric. "No creature that small should do that." "It is not cheating," said a soft-voiced engineer in a shimmer suit. "We misjudged its risk. That is on us." Beneath the railing, a face popped into view. The miner from earlier leaned over the edge, his cheeks flushed and his eyes wet with joy. "Hey," he called. "Buddy, you hear the odds swing. It went from impossible to only very unlikely." "Do you have a name?" Eric asked. "Mason," he said, and thumped his chest. "Mason, who cannot believe he pressed the wrong button and is now married to destiny. I am betting on it again. I like that it looks bored." "Do not talk so loud," an elderly bookmaker hissed as he shuffled past with a rack of paper slips. "You will make the numbers run." On the main board, the figures flickered. Earthling's rat shifted from a joke to a gamble. The crowd's laughter thinned to a blade, then tilted toward awe. Under that hum, Eric could feel something else moving: unease. The way miners looked at dark passages after a tremor. If this was a small animal from Earth, what did the big ones look like? A handler approached from the other side of the alcove, a tall being with smooth copper skin and a ring of studs along what passed for a jawline. He wore a cloak with iridescent angles that threw odd shadows. Beside him stood a cage too large to fit through the door in one piece. "You are the human," the handler said. "I am Keth of Vera. My beast will meet yours next." Plated carnosaur, 3 meters to the shoulder, tri-toe feet, bite that can crack steel rebar. It likes to toss prey to break the spine. Eric swallowed. "Good to know." Keth smiled without warmth. "I admire your nerve. It will be the last thing I admire tonight. I suggest you take pictures while your animal is still in one piece." The gate sirens fired. The board flashed. The announcer's voice rolled like thunder bottled in a can. Round 2. Earth entry versus plated carnosaur from the jungles of Vera. If you are carrying a small child, do not hold it over the rail. Eric clipped the leash to the badger's harness. The badger planted its feet and pulled like a sled dog that had spotted a rabbit. He let it go at the edge of the tunnel and watched it trot into the light without ceremony. Across the pit, the carnosaur made the earth tremble. Armor plates banded its back and thighs. Its head swung on a thick neck built for blunt force. It took a step and the arena felt smaller. The gong hit. The carnosaur did not roar. It exhaled like a furnace catching. It charged with a gait that used hips and tail like a spring. The crowd rose in one motion. The badger ran toward it. At the last instant, the badger veered left under the belly, a blur of muscle and dirt. It hit the inner ankle and latched. The carnosaur stumbled, tried to kick free, then took another step that placed all its weight on a tendon that was no longer anchored. The sound was a flat, ripping pop. The carnosaur went down on one knee and snapped at its own flank. The badger let go, scooted to the other leg, and bit at the back of the knee joint. It tore in short, ragged pulls that sent up a spray of dark blood. The giant twisted, tail lashing, claws raking furrows into the floor. A spike on its forelimb clipped the badger's shoulder. The impact spun the small body into the dirt. Eric flinched. He felt it in his ribs. The badger scrambled upright. It shook once, then darted under the chest again. It opened a trench along the long tendons that ran to the front foot. When the carnosaur tried to stand to slash down, the front foot folded. The beast toppled onto the injured side, mouth snapping, teeth carving empty air. The badger backed out and circled with stiff little steps, gauging distance with animal math older than language. It darted in and grabbed the hamstring behind the last intact rear leg. The carnosaur tried to roll. The badger rode the movement and bit higher, near the big bundle where thigh met hip. Another pop, a wet clunk. The carnosaur collapsed onto its belly. Its head thrashed once. The badger vaulted to the snout and went for the nostril slit. It clawed the soft tissue until the carnosaur reared back in reflex. The badger plunged into the space behind the eye. The thrashing slowed to a tremor. Dust settled in white curtains. The arena quieted all at once, like a valve had been closed. "Stop the count," the ref shouted. Drones zipped, scanned, and pinged a confirmation. The carcass sagged like a dropped tent. The badger dropped from the brow ridge and landed with a thud. It limped slightly. Blood streaked its left shoulder. Eric was already climbing through the handler gate. The medtech met him again, faster this time. No respiratory distress, no visible neurologic signs. That shoulder is a puncture or a gouge. We need to clean it now. If there is a flap, it may need stitches. Stitches should wait until after the event, unless you want to risk sedation. Eric knelt, and the badger pushed its head into his knee, as if claiming the right to be fussed over. The shoulder cut was ugly, but not deep. Skin and subcutaneous fat were opened. Muscle looked intact. The edges did not gape. He flushed it with saline until the fluid ran clear. He picked out grit with clean tweezers. The badger growled at the tweezers but did not snap. "Topical antibiotic," the medtech said, handing him a tube with a green cap. "Keep it clean. Bandage lightly to prevent debris. If the cut opens wider, it will need sutures and a week to 10 days to heal well. Do not let it lick too much. Do not apply anything that burns." Eric nodded and smoothed the thin film across the wound. He pressed a gauze pad and wrapped it with a self-adhesive bandage that would not slip under fur. The badger licked his wrist between wraps and then sat, offended by the indignity. Kethavera stood at the rail, with both hands gripping the bar. His eyes had gone small. He looked at the ruin of his prize animal, with the stunned vacancy of a sailor watching a ship slide under a wave. "That was not a fight," he said. "That was theft." "It attacked where legs work," the engineer in the shimmer suit said. He had drifted closer to watch. "It cut scaffolds. That is what construction crews sabotage when they cannot get at the main column." "Earth predator," someone whispered. "What else?" "Ass." The announcer tried a joke and then decided against it. "We take a 15-minute recovery before the next card. Betting counters are open. Bring a friend. Bring your questions about life choices." Mason appeared at Eric's elbow like a minor miracle at the worst time. He held 2 paper cones of steaming food and a metal cup that smelled like engine degreaser. He pushed 1 cone at Eric without waiting for approval. "You need protein," Mason said. "You fed the fighter, now feed you. I do not want you fainting, because I need you to keep this going until my payout buys me a freighter." Eric looked at the meat and spiced tubers and found he could eat. The food steadied his hands. "My plan was to lose and go home," he said, mouth dry even with the drink. "Now I have to keep an animal alive that has no fear of anything. There is not a home study course for that." Mason bumped his shoulder. "You are doing fine. That bandage looks professional. You did the saline first. That is what my cousin did for a dog when a fence got it. Kept infection away. He changed the dressing twice a day for a week. No drama. The dog was running like new by the 2nd week." "It will not have a week," Eric said. He stared at the badger. The little body had curled around the bandaged leg and fallen asleep. "It has a few hours at best." From the upper decks came a rumor that moved like a cold front. A cluster of off-worlders in elegant robes began to ask each other simple questions in worried tones. If the small ground thing could dismantle plates and tendons, what could a larger animal from the same planet do? Was the ecology of Earth a collection of tools? Who taught it to go for joints? Did the animal learn by watching machines move? Eric kept his eyes on the badger. He had watched honey badgers on old Earth films as a kid, amazed that an animal could refuse to give up even when logic said it should. That stubbornness was not romantic. It was a blunt instrument. It meant you had to be careful what you pointed it at. The announcer returned, more respectful now. "Our interval extends another 10 minutes while the grounds crew scrapes and salts. If you are just joining us, you missed a lesson in anatomy performed by a creature that weighs as much as a water jug." Bookies hustled, rewriting odds with chalk on cracked slates in case the boards failed. Earthling's rat still lagged behind the champion on the numbers, but those numbers were no longer a punchline. A few brave souls moved to the line for the underdog. Mason stood there too, his tournament ticket tucked in his shirt like a holy relic. A security officer in matte black walked by with a dossier. He paused and glanced at Eric. "If that thing of yours is toxic for handlers, we will require a specialized permit for exit. If it gets loose, we lock this city until we find it." "It is not toxic for handlers," Eric said, rubbing the badger's ear with 2 fingers the way it liked. "It is just unreasonable." The officer nodded and moved on. The shoulder bandage held. The badger woke, stretched, and put weight on the leg. It favored it but did not flinch. Eric kept a hand on its chest to feel the rhythm. Strong. Regular. He checked the gums for color. Pink. Good perfusion. He checked the pupils with a small light. Equal. Reactive. He offered water, and the badger drank without hesitation. He wiped the face again with a damp cloth to clear the last residue of venom from the fur. The announcer exhaled into the mic. "Next on the slate, not yet our Earth marvel. The armored sand crab will face a grinder from the outer ring. Those of you looking ahead, you know what that means. If the sand crab advances, we will have a lesson in patience later tonight." The crowd buzzed at that. Patience. That favored armor, or it favored the thing that refused to stop biting until armor admitted it was still skin. Eric rested his head against the cool concrete of the alcove wall. He let himself breathe the way he taught students to breathe before examinations. In through the nose. Count 4. Out through the mouth. Count 6. He pictured how he would manage the next fight if it happened in an hour. He would rinse the bandage, check the edges of the wound for swelling or leaking, change pads if soaked, offer sugar water if the badger looked wobbly. If it tore the bandage off, he would not fight for it. He would protect the eyes with a cloth if the opponent spat acid or grit. He would say the same small words he said now. Good job. Easy. Hold still. Pain is information. We will learn to listen. Mason settled beside him on the floor, cross-legged, whistling something that had only 4 notes. You know what scares me most, Mason said. It is not that the little thing keeps winning, it is that it never celebrates. It just looks for the next problem to solve. That is how a lot of us are built, Eric said softly. We are not good at parties. We are good at finding the bolt that rattles and making it stop. Mason considered that. I am great at parties, but I know what you mean. Above them, the sand crab slammed into its opponent with a sound like cinder blocks grinding. The round took its time. The crowd shifted from foot to foot. Announcers tried to make patience sound like spectacle. People drifted away to eat and to complain about odds that no longer felt like gravity. Eric cleaned his gear. He refilled the saline bottle from a sterile pouch. He folded fresh gauze and taped 3 pads in a row so he could switch quickly without thinking. He ran a finger along the leash to test for weak stitching. He pressed his palm to the badger's back and felt the sleep shudder that meant pain was present but manageable. He did not kid himself about recovery time. A cut like that on a dog would be a week of rest and careful changes, 2 if the dog ran too hard. A human with a similar wound would have stitches and a clinic visit in 10 days, maybe 14, plus light duty. He would not ask more of the badger than the badger chose to give. He just knew the animal would choose to give everything, and his job was to keep up. When the sand crab finally finished its grinding method, the crew salted the floor again. The announcer gave the crowd a summary in 3 sentences, all of them careful. The board updated for the semifinal. Letters sharp and bright, numbers nudged by fear. Mason rose and clapped Eric on the shoulder. Time to collect more chaos, he said. Eric stood. He clipped the leash to the harness and felt the badger lean into it, forward, hungry for the next puzzle. The shoulder wrap held under the pull. He looked up at the pit. The lights made a halo of dust. The city beyond the arena walls murmured like a sleeping beast. He whispered to the badger anyway. Easy. One more problem at a time. The badger flicked an ear and snorted. In the stands, someone began a chant that started as mockery and turned, mid-syllable, into respect. It ran around the bowl like fire finding oil. Eric felt the ground under him. He knew it would not stop shaking for a while. He led the badger toward the gate that would open again soon. Above, the bookies stacked fresh slips. The guards checked the locks twice. The engineer in the shimmer suit took a quiet note. Keth of Vera wrapped his cloak tighter as if the air had cooled. Mason blew on his fingers and told the terminal to be kind. The honey badger blinked at the light, bandage neat on its shoulder, eyes clear, breath even. It yawned once. Then it stared at the sand floor as if it already knew where the weak places waited. That was enough for now. The sirens pulsed a steady tone that set teeth on edge. Above the pit, the odds boards flared with a new spread that made even the loudest gamblers go quiet. Armored sand crab versus earthling entry. The announcer kept his voice level now. No jokes, no easy jabs. He asked those in the first 2 rows to step back from the rail in case something heavy threw shrapnel. Eric checked the bandage on the badger's shoulder again. No fresh bleed. The edge of the cut was pink, not angry. He pressed gently along the limb to feel for deep tenderness. The badger tolerated it, then pulled free and head-butted the crate as if to say that inspection time was over. He offered a shallow dish of water with a pinch of electrolyte salts. The badger drank, then licked a smear of soft meat from his fingers and went alert at the sound of chains above the tunnel. The gate across the way rose with a grinding complaint. The sand crab came on like a rolling boulder that had learned to walk. A dome of overlapping plates covered most of the body. The color was the pale yellow of old teeth. 2 forelimbs ended in chopping claws that could split a storage drum. Each step ground silica into powder. Heat wavered around its armored back as if the plates kept a furnace inside. The announcer counted down without flourish. The gong sounded. The sand crab advanced in short bursts, claws up, moving in a rhythm that denied easy timing. The badger trotted toward the left side, and nipped at the edge of a plate that shielded a joint. The crab snapped down and missed by inches. The bite left a scrape on keratin and nothing else. The crowd sighed as one animal. Slow fight, no glory. Eric gripped the rail and forced his jaw to unclench. This would be patience. The badger's strength was not blast force. It was a stubborn kind of geometry. It wanted to find joints and seams and pry. He whispered the plan at his own fear. Small cuts, small openings. Do not chase the big bite. The badger probed again. It feinted at a rear plate and then darted under the chassis to rake across a seam where a limb joined the belly. The sound was a rasping rip. The crab jolted, then slammed its whole body down. Dirt leapt. The badger sprang clear, with a dust cloud trailing its tail. A slow chant started high in the stands. It had no words. It was a steady beat that trained lungs to hold. Mason's voice cut through when the beat flagged. He had found a hoarse register that carried, "Stay on the joints. Right there, right there." The crab turned, claws carving wide arcs that tossed grit and shards. The badger kept the claws at its back, always circling to the place where an animal could not see well. It went at the same seam again, then again, opening the cut by less than a finger width each time. On the fourth pass, the badger dug its forepaws into the gap, held for a breath, and pulled. A plate lifted with a sick pop and then settled back. The crab shuddered and took a staggering step. The plate had been anchored to soft tissue. Anchors tore. The sand made a grinding squeal, and the crab rotated its whole mass to crush the spot where the badger had been. The badger had already slid free. It took a chop across the haunch that scored fur but did not open skin. It shook, blinked grit out of its eyes, and went right back to the seam. 10 minutes passed. 15. The announcer stopped talking and let the sound of the fight carry the story. The chant wove around the pit like rope. Even some of the traders who had booed earlier leaned in, hands on the rail, knuckles pale. The crab changed tactics. It dug its own foreclaws into the earth and heaved, sending a wave of dirt at chest height. The badger took it full face. It vanished, then exploded out of the collapsing clod and slammed its head into the open seam like a wedge. It twisted with its whole body. The plate lifted again with a groan, more this time. A clear string of fluid flashed in the light and snapped. The crab's right forelimb dragged for the first time. The claw came down on the badger's back. The impact drove air from the small body and pressed it into the soil. Eric saw the skin buckle and thought of broken ribs. The badger squirmed like a mussel under a boot. It slipped its shoulder, rolled, and slithered free with a hide peel motion that looked wrong and impossible. It came clear with a red streak across the bandage and a new raw line along the flank. Eric was already moving to the handler gate before the medtech spoke. The medic held up a palm. Wait for the count. He hated the rule. He understood it. No interference while both animals were moving. The badger limped 2 steps, tested the leg, then drove forward as if nothing had happened. It went for a different target, a thin membrane behind the small side eye. The crab jerked and slammed its head into the wall. Chips of stone fell. The badger slid, lost purchase, and dug in with claws that threw sparks on shell. Another 10 minutes. The crab's breath came in hot bursts through tiny slits near the underside. Eric could see the rhythm and knew the animal was running on the top of its range. The badger was, too. Its tongue flicked and retreated. Its sides moved like bellows. Heat shimmered above its shoulders. Eric shouted the only thing he thought might help. "Water when you are done, not before. Finish the seam." The badger did not look at him. It found the first seam again and clamped onto a strip that had started to lift. It ground its teeth and shook. The plate came away with a sound like a nail tearing free of wood. Under the plate lay tissue that looked like pale steak. The badger bit and tore. The crab convulsed and tried to fold in on the wound. It could not reach. Its mass refused to bend that way. The badger bit the same spot again. A gush of fluid sprayed. The crab's right side sagged. The badger clawed inward and dug until a bundle of fibers came free and snapped like overstretched strings. The crab shuddered. It tried to raise a claw. The limb only twitched. The crowd understood what that meant. The chant turned into words that hopped from language to language, but all said the same thing. Again. The badger moved to the second seam and repeated the work in smaller bites. It kept its head down when the crab tried another dirt wave. It backed off when the shell shifted to fall. It returned and pried without hurry. It made a hole big enough to fit its head and then its shoulders. It vanished into the crab and reappeared out the other side, dripping, eyes bright. The ref's whistle cut across the arena. The drone spun in and scanned. Readouts flashed on the boards for one lingering second. Nerve conduction flat in the right forelimb. Blood flow critical under the plates. The ref raised a gloved hand. The bell went. The badger stood beside the dead crab, as if it had misplaced a nap. It swayed once. Eric jogged into the pit with a towel and the saline bottle. He scooped the badger by the ribs to spare the bandaged shoulder and carried it at arm level so the chest could expand. He set it on the mat in the alcove and went to work. He rinsed the flank cut with steady pressure until the brown dirt turned to pink water and then ran clear. He blotted with clean gauze, tossed the soaked pads into a bin, and checked the depth. Superficial. No muscle exposed. He laid a thin film of antibiotic ointment and pressed a clean pad. The shoulder bandage had a fresh scuff and a little bleed at the corner. He peeled the edge, checked for gap, and added one strip of sterile tape to secure it. He cleaned the eyes with saline, wiping from the inner corner out with separate pads. He checked the gums again. Pink. Capillary refill under 2 seconds. He pinched the skin between the shoulders and watched it snap back. No dehydration. He offered water. The badger drank in short sets, then paused to breathe, then drank again. He put a little honey in a dish and the animal licked it with slow precision. Sugar would hit fast. Not too much, or it would upset the stomach. The medtech hovered at his shoulder with a small infrared thermometer. He aimed at the inner ear and forehead, elevated but within safe range for a short effort. The medic handed over a cool cloth. Eric draped it over the badger's neck and shoulders, careful not to wet the bandage. He used another cloth on the paws to remove sand that had embedded along the pads. One pad had a shallow slice. He cleaned it, dried it, and wrapped a thin layer of self-adhesive around it, snug but not tight. He would change that wrap as soon as the fight ended. Paw pad cuts can take a week to feel normal. The wrap would protect the cut long enough for one more fight. He knew that meant risk. He accepted it with a tight throat. Mason crouched just outside the alcove, his eyes wide and shining. He tried to speak and only managed a laugh that broke into something like a sob. He held out a chipped bottle from a cooler. Eric shook his head. He could not risk anything that dulled his focus. Mason nodded and tucked the bottle away like a contraband treasure. Ketha Vera did not come to the rail this time. He sat on a bench and stared at his hands. The engineer in the shimmer suit slid closer and lowered his voice. He had a small scanner held loose in one palm. He did not point it at the badger. He looked at Eric instead. "The way it pries plates," the engineer said. "It reminds me of how welders test old rivets. Wiggle the joint without breaking the whole seam, then pull only what must fail. Animals learn what works," Eric said. "We have the same lesson with jar lids and stuck bolts. Try steady twist first. If that fails, use a lever." The engineer smiled with quiet respect. "The razor horn will not offer joints that fail quietly. It is an engine that ends distance. It lives on one good charge and the mess that follows." Eric followed the engineer's gaze to the far gate, where handlers were grooming the champion with a brush the size of a broom. The razor horn's hide was a slate gray that caught light like wet stone. 2 long horns projected from its head in parallel, not curved like a herbivore, but set to split and lift. Spines lined its shoulders. Its legs were made for short sprints and violent shoves. The air around it seemed to narrow, so that every path in the room bent toward the horns. The boards pulsed with fresh figures. The odds were still in favor of the champion, but the gap had shrunk to a number that tasted like a dare. Arguments broke out in the aisles. Some wanted to recalibrate the entire ecology of Earth on the spot. Some called for a rule review. One heavy trader demanded a drug screening and was told to file a written protest and stop yelling at the techs. A lanky scholar asked if Earth had things larger than a honey badger. Eric told him yes, and kept his face polite when the scholar went pale. Mason came back from the betting line, clutching a new ticket and a fried pastry. He pressed the pastry into Eric's hand and nodded toward the boards. I doubled down, he said. I told the terminal, I love a story with a bad idea at the center. It beeped at me like an old dog that understands a word. We are committed. Eric forced a bite and felt the grounding weight of sugar and heat. His hands steadied. He adjusted the badger's harness to keep pressure off the bandaged shoulder. He loosened the chest strap by a notch so the lungs could do their full work. He checked the wrap on the paw again and changed it for a fresh strip when the old one took grit. He cleaned the ear that had been torn in the first round and dabbed a bit more ointment along the ragged edge. The badger grunted and leaned a little of its weight against his shin. That small truss set a hook in his chest that he tried hard to ignore. He spoke to the medtech in a lower voice. If I throw the flag to stop the fight, how fast can we get him out? 10 seconds to clear the other animal with drones, the medic said. Then we go in, you lift, we cover. If ribs break, we will keep the chest supported. If a horn punctures the belly, we compress and run. I have fluids ready. I have a capsule with oxygen for short transport. I cannot promise anything if a horn finds the heart. Eric nodded. He looked at the razor horn and pictured angles. He pictured the way its head would need to drop to charge. He pictured the line to the eye and the way a small body could ride a crest of hide to a place where horns could not reach. He also pictured how fast a mistake could end everything. He decided he would stop the fight if the badger lost its rhythm, or if breathing went ragged. He would not let stubbornness turn into cruelty. He accepted that the crowd would riot if he pulled early. He accepted that riot beats a dead animal. The announcer spoke again. He sounded like a man who had seen a storm climb a hill. Final round in 30 minutes. The grounds crew will remove what remains of the sand crab. The rail teams will install extra barriers on the south and west edges. If you are here for the first time, this is your last chance to buy a blast shield. I am not joking. Time markers lit out along the inner ring. 25 minutes. 20. Eric used the window. He offered more water, small amounts spaced apart. He inspected the claws for chips. One was worn to a flat edge, but intact. He rubbed a dab of balm into the paw pads, then wiped away the excess so the wrap would hold. He watched the breathing slow. He counted to 12 between rises. He put a hand on the ribs and felt smooth work. He closed his eyes for 5 breaths and opened them again. The chatter on the walkway shifted from jokes to plans. A young broker told her partner they would sell the shop if Mason hit his number. A guard told a vendor to secure the vats. A child with silver flecks in his hair asked his father if Earth had cats that could do this. The father used a voice that did not carry and said that Earth had house cats that acted like kings, and a sea that ate ships, and storms that flattened cities, and that someone from that place could carry a ridiculous animal into a bad idea and make the whole room agree. It was the most important thing in the galaxy for one night. The badger slept for 10 minutes. Eric timed it. When it woke, it stood and shook off like a dog out of rain. The bandage held, the paw wrap held, the eye was clear. The medtech took another temperature reading and nodded. Elevated from effort, not danger. Eric swapped the towel for a fresh, cool one and let the badger sit with it draped like a tiny cape while the minutes clicked. When the call came to report to the tunnel, Eric rose and clipped the leash. He looked at the surrender flag on its hook and unclipped it. He folded it once and tucked it into the back of his belt, where his hand could find it without thought. He took one last look at the badger's gums and watched the pink flash back under his thumb. He whispered the plan once more. One problem at a time. Mason touched his shoulder and spoke without theatrics. Stop it if you must. I will still buy you dinner when this is over. Eric managed a thin smile. Hold me to it. They walked toward the light that made the dust glow. The crowd did not jeer now. It made a wide sound that felt like weather. Across the pit, the razor horn pawed at the dirt and tossed its head. It made a low bellow that vibrated the air without needing volume. The announcer kept it simple. Champion, challenger, final. The badger leaned forward until the harness took the strain. It blinked once in the light as if adjusting a lens. Eric steadied his breath and found his mark on the rail. He lifted his chin at the medtech. He touched the folded flag. He placed his other hand on the cool metal and felt it hum with the machine of the arena gearing up to send everything forward. That was enough for this moment. The fight would begin when the bell found them. The city held its breath. and for a quiet beat, even the bookies forgot their ledgers. The gong did not just sound, it split the air like a hammer strike on brittle glass. The crowd surged forward against the rails, their bodies pressed shoulder to shoulder, eyes locked on the pit. The razor horn pawed at the dirt once, twice, and dropped its head. Its horns glinted, both long as spears, polished by years of combat. The muscles across its shoulders bunched and quivered, ready to explode. The honey badger lowered itself too, not crouched in fear, but in a stance that looked like it had remembered something from long ago, an instinct that said charging headfirst at a nightmare was reasonable. Its tail bristled, ears pinned back. Eric's breath caught. Then they moved. The razor horn thundered forward, hooves tearing gouges in the dirt. Its bellow rattled the inner walls, sending dust cascading from cracked pylons. The badger sprinted to meet it, claws throwing grit behind it, body low, eyes fixed. Impact seemed inevitable until the badger dropped at the last instant. The razor horn's horn skimmed inches above, close enough to shear fur, but the little predator twisted sideways, rolled, and clawed its way up the massive beast's neck before momentum carried them apart. The crowd screamed. The razor horn thrashed its head, smashing against the wall, trying to dislodge the scrap of fur and teeth now anchored near its jaw. The badger held, claws gouging into hide, jaws snapping for anything soft. The horned giant slammed itself into the floor, rolled in desperation, its spines tearing gouges into the arena sand. The badger vanished beneath its bulk. Eric's stomach clenched. He grabbed the rail with both hands, the surrender flag half raised, then the badger burst from under the razor horn's chest, bloodied but still moving, a flap of skin hanging loose along its flank. It shook itself, teeth bared, and went straight back in. "Ribs intact," the medtech muttered from beside Eric, scanning through the drone feed. "Laceration, shallow, bleeding fast but not catastrophic. Your animal still fights." The badger scrambled onto the beast's shoulder and went for the eye. The razor horn jerked its head violently, but the small predator latched on with a grim stubbornness that froze the arena into silence. Its teeth sank into the corner of the socket. The razor horn howled, a noise so deep it vibrated through bone. It staggered, flailed, tried to impale itself against the wall to crush the badger, but the badger only dug deeper. Its claws raked across tender tissue, blood sprayed, painting the arena floor black under the lights. Eric's hands shook. He wanted to pull the flag, to end this, but the fight had already tipped. The giant's steps grew uncertain. It stomped, faltered, staggered again. Each thrash became slower, more desperate. Its vision gone on one side, it spun wildly, but its body betrayed it. The badger clung on. Bite, claw, rip. No pause, no hesitation. 20 minutes in, both combatants were coated in blood. The razor horn bellowed again, weaker this time, a sound full of fatigue. Its knees buckled. It collapsed to the side, the weight of its body shaking the arena like a quake. And still the badger held on. It was only when the giant beast rolled flat, breath coming in rattles, that the badger let go. It stood on the champion's skull, sides heaving, tongue lolling, fur matted into stiff spikes of red. It growled once, sharp and guttural, as if to remind everyone in the pit that it was not done until it chose to be. The announcer didn't speak. His mic crackled, feedback screaming. His voice finally broke through, hoarse, reverent. "The razor horn is down, the new champion," he swallowed. "Earth's honey badger." The crowd erupted. Some screamed in triumph, others in horror. Bookies collapsed behind their counters as odds tables glitched and credits transferred faster than the terminals could print receipts. The minor mason screamed himself hoarse, waving his ticket until he dropped to his knees in disbelief. Eric vaulted the barrier and sprinted to the badger, dropping to his knees in the gore-soaked dirt. The medtech was already there, with a field kit. "Multiple lacerations," the medic rattled off. "One along the flank, 3 centimeters, through dermis. Superficial fascia, intact. Ribs stable. No abdominal penetration. Bandage required. Paw wraps intact, no fresh damage. Hydration borderline, treat now." Eric flushed the flank wound with saline until the blood thinned. He pressed gauze, wrapped a fresh bandage tight enough to hold but loose enough for breathing. He checked eyes, ears, gums. Gums pale, but responding. No collapse, no gasping, still strong. The badger growled at the medtech's hands, then sagged against Eric's knee, exhausted but alive. It will need a week, minimum, the medtech said firmly. That flank wound should close in 7 to 10 days with daily care. Paw pad cut the same. Monitor for infection, change bandages twice daily, no exertion. This animal should not fight again in that span. Eric nodded, relief flooding through him like cool water. It won't. The crowd thundered, but he heard none of it. He heard only the badger's steady, rasping breaths as he lifted it gently into the crate, patting it with towels. He latched the door, sat back, and for the first time that night, allowed himself a full breath. The payout carts arrived, wheeled by sweating staff, stacked with gold bricks that clinked with each step. Mason stood nearby, staring at his own terminal slip, now verified by 2 guards. His jaw opened and closed, his face somewhere between laughter and fainting. I own a ship," Mason whispered, then promptly toppled backward onto the dirt, out cold. The legend began even before the badger's crate left the pit. Whispers spiraled upward through the stands, caught in every language, translated, embellished. If this was Earth's rat, then what else had Earth hidden? What monsters walked forests and deserts where such creatures were common? Eric ignored them all. He carried the crate through the back corridors, past the scent of burned oil and blood, past the stunned guards who no longer laughed. He stepped out into the night air of Droveth Prime, heavy and dry, stars flickering through the smog. He set the crate down on the back of the transport cart and sat beside it. The badger shifted inside, snorted once, and fell asleep, utterly indifferent to its new legend. Eric leaned back, head against the cart, the noise of the arena fading into the distance. He hadn't come here for glory, or credits, or legend. He had come to get rid of a shipping mistake. Instead, he left with a survivor. And somewhere in the galaxy tonight, across bars, ships, and marketplaces, someone would be whispering about the trial that ended with a small, stubborn predator from Earth standing on the body of nightmares. The honey badger yawned. That was enough.